All right, welcome. Liberty North AP Psych, virtual Wednesday, January 13th. And we are going to be starting our cognitive unit. Okay, so I'm going to introduce a couple of memory related topics today. So we got our 3-stage model of memory. And then I've got kind of a specific summary of AP learning targets 2 and 1 over here, which we'll go to. Actually, learning targets, so there's 10 learning targets for memory. Your learning targets are on Canvas in the module that I just published today, and also under announcements. But there's 10 for memory. All of them except for number 3, which are the names, could be done using the 3-stage model of memory. So this diagram will be up the entire unit. So as long as we're covering cognition, we'll be referring to this model. So I will send a picture out on Twitter at the end of the day. And then this is also the thumbnail picture for YouTube. So, but also it'll be up here. So don't worry about it if you don't get it all down. I try to keep the videos 15 minutes and under. So my first one was 21, but then everyone after that's been 15. So, okay. So we're going to start. The first cognitive process that we cover in this unit is memory, which is a big process. So we're going to be on page 319 and 320, in which they actually have this chart. It's a little bit simpler in the book. I've kind of added a little bit more to it so we could kind of be more concise, if you will, and put everything in one spot. So I'm going to go through it, just kind of introduce it, and then we will be referring to this over and over and over. And then I'll kind of summarize just some important things for learning target 1 and 2. Okay. So this is a 3-stage model of memory. So this is kind of like what we believe is our diagram of actually how our memory process works. It was created, I think, first diagrammed in 1955, I think. It was then updated in 1998. And then 2011, we're going to watch some videos. A brand new memory phenomenon was discovered, which is called superior autobiographical memory, or SAM memory, in which people under research and neurological testing demonstrate the ability to remember everything. So we used to think that that was not possible based on what we knew of memory and neurologically, but there seem to be some people that we're finding throughout the world that have that ability. So it's just a very awesome time to be involved in that and being in neurological research there. Okay. So what I have is in red are your systems or stages of memory. So sensory, short-term, long-term. Okay. Black are your processes involved in memory. So mainly encoding, storage, and retrieval. Okay. Green is just kind of the definition of each stage, kind of what it does. And then brown is kind of the neurological implications, for specifically those two. Okay. All right. And then again, what you need to picture in your mind with memory, the same that you do when we talk about senses, is that this is a giant filter. Okay. So information starts here with an external event, and then it has to work its way through the filter to get to long-term memory, which is our permanent storage of memory. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go down each stage and then define them, and then also tell you how they work together. And then I'm going to go through the 3 processes of memory and define those as we go. Okay. All right. So my first stage of memory. So we'll start with an external event, which could be anything, but I think for you guys, you're in school. So, this is kind of, you studying or needing to remember information for a test or for a class or whatever. So sensory memory is the first stage or system of memory, okay? And it does encoding and storage. I think storage and retrieval are self-explanatory. So again, for me to have a memory, I need to be able to store information, correct? But then it does me no good if I can store it, but I can't retrieve it. So I need to be able to pull it back, okay? Now also, I need to be able to encode. And encode, I always remember encode is editing, EE. Okay, so it's basically like summarizing or taking notes. Again, and I think we'll understand that here as we talk about sensory memory, because it's kind of the memory that really deals with encoding. Encoding is the main process here. So again, we've already established several times that my senses are always gathering information. They're always on. But again, I am not aware of most of that information, and that's sensory memory. So it's basically a holding bin for sensory input. Okay, so all my senses are gathering information and they bring it into sensory memory. And then the majority of it is dropped. It's encoded out, it's filtered out, and it's forgotten. So, or it's edited out. So basically, sensory memory holds all the information from my senses and input just briefly for a few seconds. And we'll take a test later on if we have time in which we'll test everybody's sensory memory for vision, so visual sensory memory. And we'll see how long your brain holds it while it's encoding it. And it'll be a few seconds. And everybody's kind of a little bit different. But it's going to hold all that information just briefly so that the important information can be edited out and passed on. And then everything else is just forgotten. So again, when you're in class, mainly you're going to get, all your sensory input, but probably your sense of touch, smell, and taste are not going to need to be encoded. Probably hearing and visual information is going to need to be encoded and passed on, and the rest is just going to be forgotten. Okay, so brief storage, just a few seconds, but it holds large amounts of information, and then therefore it's kind of like the filter. Start of the filter, it's going to grab the important bits of information and pass them on. Okay. So sensory memory is all about encoding, about editing, taking that huge amount of information and kind of breaking it down into small parts and passing it on, okay? Short-term memory, which is called my active and working memory. I have it starred because this is probably generally the most important memory process, most important memory stage or system that we have. One of the reasons is it does all three processes of memory. So it encodes again, so it filters out and edits, it stores, and it's retrieval. Okay, so it works with long-term memory on retrieving information that I need to use. Okay, so you've got all three processes here. So anytime there's encoding, there can also be forgetting. So more stuff is going to be edited out and dropped. All right, so you I think the book has a diagram where you start out with 10 dots here, you get down to 7 here, and then maybe you get down to 5 or 4 here that actually get passed down to long-term memory. Now, this is where I told you we're going to bring this up again, but that consciousness dial comes back into play. So again, remember our view master with a disk that has the 10 pictures. We put it in there and we can control which picture we look at. We cannot look at all 10 pictures at once. We can only look at one picture at a time. Okay. My episodic buffer chooses what's on the disk. Okay. So again, we talked about every day you wake up and your disk is loaded into your brain, if you will. So that's going to be active working memory, pulling the items out for my 10 disks or my 10 pictures, or pulling the disk and putting it into working memory. My episodic buffer is actually what chooses the disks or the items that are in working memory or that are, the 10 pictures. And then my central executive is actually the dial. Okay. It's what actually turns and allows me to focus on whatever it is I need to focus. Okay. Because there's a lot of stuff in here. All right. So again, encoding is going to take place because this is like a big traffic hub of information, going through it, coming back. I'm using it. It's going to store information briefly, but anytime I need to use it, it's going to keep it. And then again, it's involved in retrieving information that has been in long-term memory that I need to use. Okay. So again, if I load my disk for the day, I get up in the morning, the episodic buffer is going to grab everything out of here that I need. And it's also going to organize anything that's already in here that I need to use for the day. So it's going to pull out, my memory of how to get to school, where my classes are, my friends, how to do lunch, and all that kind of stuff out of here. Also all my class information. And then my central executive will turn the dial to whatever specific thing I need, at the appropriate time. Okay. All right. So, we'll be talking a lot about this stage of memory and this system of memory, because there's a lot that goes on here. And again, this is kind of the big, key, important part of cognitive processes, but also memory. Okay. All right. If it makes it past here, it goes to long-term memory, which is my permanent storage. All right. So we believe that if it gets here, it's permanent. It's also organized and it's filed away for later use. Once I create a long-term memory, I create neurologically what we call is a memory trace, which again, you remember, neurons work in networks, not individually. And every time a long-term memory is created, it's a neural pathway. It's a neural network to that specific memory. So I have what we call memory traces. So I can actually trace the neural paths to the memory. All right. So stores it permanently and then works with active and working memory to retrieve information. Okay. All right. So again, if you take a quiz, which you will this unit, hopefully you have it either here or here, right? Some of it's going to get here that you're going to store permanently forever. Some of it you're just going to keep in your brain, and it's going to be on the disk while we're talking about memory. All right. And when we take the quiz, you're going to pull it in here. Okay. So again, if you have the brain freeze, which we've all talked about when you're taking a quiz, that's my episodic buffer, and it can't find it. Okay. So it's looking for it because it knows that you need it, but it can't find it. Okay. So that's what you're feeling there. You can say instead of a brain freeze, it's my episodic buffer's not working, or it can't find it. Okay. All right. And then once it finds it, the central executive will immediately turn there so that I can use it for the quiz. Okay. So this is how I retrieve information. Again, there's nothing to retrieve here. All right. So this is my retrieval loop. So it goes to here for me to use. Once I use it, it goes back. Okay. All right. Now, this is what we call conscious processing. Okay. Because I am working stuff through the filter. All right. So this is kind of me consciously working with manipulating my cognitive processes so I can remember information and use it. Okay. Now there's also an unconscious processing that's involved in memory, and that is controlled completely by my brain. And that's when I have an external event and my brain just grabs it and sticks it into long-term memory. Okay. Without really, I have really nothing to do with that. So, one thing that we're going to talk about, which goes along those two paths, is memory. I am in control of my memory at some times, and other times my brain is. Okay. But my brain overall is what controls my memory. So the best way to improve your memory is to understand how your brain does it and work with your brain. And that's the way you can actually increase your memory. So, I think we've all experienced times where fighting against our brain. I'm studying, but stuff is just not going. They're just not keeping it. But then my brain will grab, the most random thing and stick it all the way in here. I remember my mom used to like to make cookies in the evening. And so I remember I'd be studying, trying to get stuff prepared for a quiz or whatever. And then when it came quiz time, I just remember the cookie stuff, not the information I was studying. So, again, the brain grabbed onto that memory and stuck it in there. But a lot of times it wasn't sticking the stuff I wanted it to keep in there for my quizzes or tests. Okay. All right. Okay. So filter, sensory, short-term, long-term. All right. We have encoding, storage, and retrieval. All right. And then we have conscious processing and unconscious processing. Okay. All right. So we'll come on over here. And what we have here is, let's look closer. So what we have here is AP learning target 1 and 2. So sorry, I wrote them out of order, and then that was a lot of writing. So once I had it written down, I wasn't going to erase it and rewrite it. So AP learning target 1, which is identify cognitive processes or processing involved in memory and cognition. And number 2 is identify systems of memory that are involved in the cognitive processes. Okay. So here we've got our 3 processes that we've already talked about. So we've got encoding, storage, and retrieval, which are involved in memory. We've also got unconscious and conscious processing, which is called automatic and effortful. So again, effortful or conscious is stuff that I have to work through the filter. I have to use mnemonic devices, rehearsal, memory type of strategies in my conscious mind to get it through. And unconscious is just when my brain grabs it and sticks it in there for me. Okay. I also have deep and shallow processing, which I did not have up here. And these 2 are exactly what they sound like. So deep processing is when I'm really working with the information. It's generally information that I'm going to need, for my life. This would be like if you have to take a professional test moving forward, when you graduate from college, if you got to take your MCAT, your GRE, or any, professional like test, you're really going to study and work with that information. You're really going to go in depth with it so that you can remember it. This is going to be like, if you're just taking a little quiz, or if I'm cramming for a test, I know I'm not going to use it later on. I just want to get the grade. and I'm going to study, and then just drop it all. Okay. So deep and shallow processing, and then selective and divided processing. It would also help and work if you put attention here. So we've already talked about that. So selective and divided attention. All right. So that would be, days you guys come into class, or I as a teacher, there are days that we're really focused. We're on our mental game, we're paying attention, we're with the lesson, we're remembering and learning the information. And then there's days that we're just divided, we're unfocused, our minds are wandering. And that can even happen within one class. You might be very focused and in tune. And then, you're divided, you're worried about something else, or, your mind just starts to wander. Okay. So selective and divided. And then the famous metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. Okay. So I'm wondering if I even did that. I don't know if I went over that stuff in the other video. But that's what we're going to do this unit, is we're thinking about thinking. Okay. All right. So systems and stages of memory. We have, of course, sensory, short-term, and long-term, right, which we talked about. And then we also have what's called implicit and explicit memory. Okay. Which implicit memory goes into the unconscious processing generally. And that's what we call procedural memory. And this is just stuff that I need to remember to survive, like brushing my teeth, riding a bike, driving, those are things I don't consciously have to pull up. My brain just loads in for me. So these are going to be kind of like things every day that my episodic buffer just pulls into active working memory for me. Okay. And then explicit memory, which is what we mostly do at school, is when I am, trying to remember facts, information, and I'm trying to consciously, generally, effortful, get those through the filter. Okay. All right. So that is the intro to memory. Okay. So again, I'll send out some pictures. If you have any questions, you can go to the open Zoom link for the class, or you can email me. It's fine. Okay. All right. So we'll start tomorrow and Friday. We'll start doing a fun memory challenger activity each day, and we'll apply it to this. We're also going to watch some great videos on photographic memory, SAM memory. I think there's another one, but we'll watch some cool videos of a memory phenomenon, and we'll apply everything to this right here. Okay. All right. Have a good virtual Wednesday.